Perhaps the most famous character cut from the TV show was Lady Stoneheart. But that is but one aspect of her existence that is unusual, if not just short of unique. George twisted the undead trope, or inverted it, whatever you want to call it, to make Beric Dondarrion a good guy. But he may have gone more classic with Lady Stoneheart, returning from death to take revenge on those who wronged her and her family. I say may have, because we pretty much know the full story of Beric Dondarrion. It's complete. We may learn a few more details, but for all intents and purposes, it's over. Lady Stoneheart, not so much. We have... Honestly, she hasn't been around very long, so we have a lot less to work with and a lot more guesswork. So there's clearly a lot more to come, or at least if it's not a lot more to come, we have a lot of trouble guessing what it's going to be. Jaime, Brienne, the Brotherhood Without Banners, Thoros, Harwin, and the rest, the Freys, the Red Wedding 2.0, Jane Westerling, Edmure Tully, the Blackfish. These are all characters she might interact with or are interacting with actively. Obviously, the rest of the BWB and Thoros and Harwin. But there's other characters she may interact with, and we have to consider what that might be like. We know she's searching for Arya, but will she find her? Will Arya and Catelyn be reunited? Will she learn that Rickon and Bran are alive, or where Sansa is? And what does her case tell us about the undead? I mean, she's basically a Firewhite, right? I mean, that's what he called Beric, and Beric passed his life force onto her. So she is the same category in terms of what animates her and has her walking around, the power behind all that. Even if we don't know exactly what that is, it's the same as what it was for Beric, even though their personalities are quite different. So we've got a number of possible reunions to discuss, who's on her hit list, what's in store for her and the rest of the BWB, and we'll include a bit of real-life lore about revenants and related mythology to spice things up a bit. All that and more on this episode of History of Westeros podcast. Hello and welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of History of Westeros. It's Sunday at 3 o'clock Eastern, which is when we do our regular live streams. When we're in a TV season, the time slot is 6 p.m. Mondays. Since we're getting closer to that, I wanted to throw out that reminder. If you want to catch us after the live stream or on a different platform, we're available as a video also on Spotify and any other podcast platform as an audio episode. And if you listen on Patreon as a member, you get it ad-free. Shout out to our good friend Nina. Happy anniversary to Nina and her husband James. It's their first. Yay. Make sure to check out goodqueenally.tumblr.com. That's one L in Alley. And she gave me some good thoughts for this one, as usual. No surprise there, right? Questions, if you have them, put them here in the chat, or ask us at westeroshistory@gmail.com, or send us a message on Patreon. Hit us at Blue Sky or in the Facebook group or on the Discord. We'll see it and we'll answer it. Maybe not right away, but we'll get there. Our trivia question for today. Answer will be at the end, but the answer is also during the episode. If you're paying attention, you might hear me drop that. Lady Catelyn, of course, is killed at the Red Wedding. But what was the original location George planned for her death? Like I said, answer at the end. Today, let me tell you what our different sections are. We have first appearance and mention, as we so often do. Then we have undead unfinished. Then we have rumors. Then we have what is a revenant. That's the IRL discussion. Then we have a broken brotherhood. That's actually a quote from Thoros. A Storm of Swords appreciation. This Lady Stoneheart's reveal is at the end, of course, of A Storm of Swords, a book that is full of climactic moments. So I wanted to sort of just compare a lot of those climactic moments to each other real quickly before we get back to the episode at the halfway point. And when we do so, we'll continue with the path of the Hangwoman. Then you must prove your faith. Then a section on reunions, parsed to Arya, Uncle Brynden, Howland Reed, Sansa, Winterfell, and the North. And then we will finish with Outlook for Vengeance. Some of the meatiest part of the episode is at the end. But there's plenty of good stuff before. Our poll today, if you are watching on YouTube or if you are catching the episode on Spotify, which I believe is the only places where our polls can appear, the functionality isn't there on other platforms. Like, oh, we do not have the technology for polling.
The technology exists.
The technology does exist, just not on every platform that we're on. That's what I meant to say. So the question is, will Arya and Stoneheart meet? Simple yes or no question. Do you believe Arya and Stoneheart will meet, or do you think they won't? Let's get to the first mention. After a series of incredible climaxes and a storm of swords, this is the final one in the whole book. Quote.
They say Lord Beric always gives a man a trial, that he won't kill a man unless something's proved against him. You can't prove anything against me. The Red Wedding was my father's work, and Rymon's and Lord Bolton's. Lothar rigged the tents to collapse and put the crossbowmen in the gallery with the musicians. Bastard Walder led the attack on the camps. They're the ones you want, not me. I only drank some wine. You have no witness.
As it happens, you're wrong there.
The singer turned to the hooded woman.
Milady?
The outlaws parted as she came forward, saying no word. When she lowered her hood, something tightened inside Merritt's chest, and for a moment he could not breathe. No, I saw her die. She was dead for a day and night before they stripped her naked and threw her body in the river. Raymond opened her throat from ear to ear. She was dead.
And then she was in the river for a while before Beric came along. She was dead. Was. Or maybe she still is and is walking around. It's a semantics point. We don't need to get into that. Now, this isn't the bravest man in the first place. I wouldn't say he's a coward either, but this would be, this is enough to make brave people terrified. And before seeing her, he was already trying to argue, don't hang me. So he was already quite afraid. Before that, he was well primed for additional fear, shall we say. He had already knew that basically the moment he saw his cousin, Peter Pim. I forget if that's his cousin or his brother. What? I don't remember. It doesn't matter. He knew. Peter could have made that same argument. You have no proof. You have no. Yeah, but they do have proof, and I don't think they really care about proof because Lord Beric's not around anymore. It's really just guilt by association at this point. But he really was guilty. So yeah, fair enough. Now let's just think about this from her perspective, not this hanging of Merritt. That's a little more straightforward. But I just mean like the moment she came back to life, quote unquote. When Beric woke, it was jolting and strange. He describes it. He felt the fire in his mouth. He felt the wound. He had some idea where he was, but it was confusing. But his body was whole, right? Except for the actual hole in his chest from the lance that Sir Gregor put there. But he wasn't like debilitated all over. His flesh wasn't rotting. His skin wasn't melting, in the water and all that. So I consider the possibility that she is in pain all the time. It's also possible she doesn't really feel much pain. So it's really just both ends of the spectrum are possible here. Has she looked in a mirror? That's a tough question. It's not like mirrors are common in Westeros, and she's not exactly living like a lady in these caves and hideouts we see. But, maybe she saw her reflection in water. That's not unlikely. And she sees how everyone looks at her. But what does that matter to her? As an undead being that's really focused on her revenge and finding her children, or maybe just one child in particular at this point, I don't know how much this affects her, but it might affect her a lot. Because if you think about what she was as a living person, she cared about looks when she was alive. She was highborn and good looking, and yeah, I'm not faulting her for that, but it definitely mattered. I'm not saying she was vain. But there's that time she thinks about how sad it is for Brienne to be ugly. The quote is, "Pity filled Catelyn's heart. Is there any creature on earth as unfortunate as an ugly woman?" Now, to be fair, the follow-up line, because that's a little gnarly of a statement there, but the following line is, and yet, when Renly cut away her torn cloak and fastened a rainbow in its place, Brienne of Tarth did not look unfortunate. Her smile lit up her face, and her voice was strong and proud. And then she swears to defend Renly with her life, and then Catelyn goes right back to pitying her when she sees how Brienne is looking at Renly, like, oh boy, she is just besotted, isn't she? So, and that's important too, because the next person Brienne swears to is her, right? She swears to Renly, and then Renly dies, and she swears her life and service to Catelyn instead. Now, yeah, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. This isn't there's no system for this kind of sort of thing. But Lady Stoneheart is probably the ugliest human-like creature walking around. I mean, wow, she's fearsomely disturbing when you get the description. And here it is. Merritt Frey would surely agree. Quote,
Her cloak and collar hid the gash his brother's blade had made, but her face was even worse than he remembered. The flesh had gone pudding soft in the water and turned the color of curdled milk. Half her hair was gone, and the rest had turned as white and brittle as a crone's. Beneath her ravaged scalp, her face was shredded skin and black blood where she had raked herself with her nails. But her eyes were the most terrible thing. Her eyes saw him, and they hated.
That's such good writing. Like, the description is terrifying, but the eyes are the worst thing. And there's nothing, like, unnatural about them, right? He doesn't describe, like, they're discolored. Now, there is a later quote that it makes it sound like they're a bit reddish. We'll talk about that at the time. But he's not saying anything about that. It's just the look in them. It's not their physical qualities. And, of course, he doesn't note anything unusual about them. So it's just her intensity is more disturbing to him than her horrifying visage, which is really quite horrifying. So that's very intense, very descriptive. Now, he says she was worse than he remembered because he saw her dead body, and he saw her dead body as it started to turn for about a day and a half. Then they threw her in the water, and the body drifted downstream to be found. Yeah. George is very big on emotional eyes. Coming back to that briefly, we saw the polar opposites like just now, if you caught that. We got the purest love look from Brienne to Renly, and then the purest look of hatred and murder from Stoneheart to Merritt Frey. So the red eyes burning thing is kind of a reminder that she's a firewhite. I don't know that it's meant to be taken literal, but yeah, it's something to think about. Now, the actual first time the word Stoneheart appears is in a Brienne chapter when she's speaking to Lord Randall Tarly. Quote,
Clegane's turned outlaw. He rides with Beric Dondarrion now, it would seem. Or not, the tales vary. Show me where they're hiding, I will gladly slit their bellies open, pull their entrails out, and burn them. We've hanged dozens of outlaws, but the leaders still elude us. Clegane, Dondarrion, the Red Priest, and now this woman Stoneheart? How do you propose to find them when I cannot?
Obviously, Randall Tarly not a very big fan of Brienne. And obviously he has some information wrong here. Or at least he acknowledges that he might know that the information might be wrong. Like, Clegane is not riding with Beric Dondarrion. Beric Dondarrion isn't riding with anybody. And that's Lemoncloak, not Sandor Clegane. And actually he's referring to what Rorge did. Rorge was wearing the helmet when the worst of the crimes were committed. But of course Rorge was killed by Brienne. And it's now... Lem is now wearing the helmet. So Tarly has a lot of experience in hunting outlaws, and he says, I've hanged dozens of them. And one of the brothers later points that out, that, yeah, Tarly's killed a lot of us. But that's done. Tarly has stopped because he went to King's Landing the moment he heard that Marjorie was about to go on trial. And then he was made Master of Laws. He's on the Small Council. He wasn't when he was chasing the outlaws. So that's a big difference. He's way above this now. He might send someone else out to hunt outlaws, but it's really just not his business anymore. It does make sense that the Master of Laws would deal with outlaws, but he's got much bigger problems. Like the Golden Company just landed and the War of Five Kings is still raging, and he might be plotting against the people he's planning to work for. He might be on the side of Aegon and the Golden Company, and that's a whole separate topic, but the point is he's not really concerned with Stoneheart anymore. If he turns his attention back to that, it won't be something he handles personally. Here's a quote from A Game of Thrones. Might just be a coincidence, but check the wording here. It's pretty curious. Quote,
Robb, I will not soften the truth for you. If you lose, there is no hope for any of us. They say there is naught but stone at the heart of Casterly Rock. Remember the fate of Rhaegar's children.
Whether George meant that as a setup for Stoneheart, like it's entirely possible he hadn't chosen the name Stoneheart. We definitely know he planned for her death from the beginning. And, but it wasn't like this. He changed a lot of it, and maybe the end game too. We don't know what the original end game for her was, and we don't know what it is now. But it's still a good quote, even if it wasn't intentional. It's telling, because her last line there is "Remember the fate of Rhaegar's children." And when Cat becomes Stoneheart, she has a similar attitude. She has no problem hanging Podrick Payne. He's a 14-year-old at most. He might only be 13. So yeah, she doesn't even like consider. She's like, yeah, this is a Lannister squire. Like, no question we kill him. It wasn't even the idea that he's too young didn't matter to them at all. Brienne's argument towards that, it didn't help. Like, she didn't even really try to get Hyle Hunt off because she didn't really have an argument to make there. Like, that's Randall Tarley's man, you know, blah, blah, blah. I got nothing. But Podrick Payne, he's a boy. Like, that should have counted for something, but nah, they didn't care. And what would she do if she got her hands on Tommen or Myrcella? I don't think it would be pretty. I don't think she's going to get her hands on either of them. I'm not predicting that, but just the point being, she is on that level now. She's willing to go that far. And I am predicting both Tommen and Myrcella to die, just not at the hands of Lady Stoneheart and her people. And speaking of the Lannisters and hands, it's notable that she nearly had her throat cut by a Lannister footpad sent to kill Bran. Instead of her throat, it was her hand, or hands. I forget if it was one or both. Anyway, those scars became part of her POV. She'd look at them from time to time. They're a memory of what she's capable of and her symbol of her devotion to her children. I mean, when it came down to it, she did not hesitate. She proved herself willing to take a knife for her kid. And that wasn't just bravado. It wasn't like, if it came to this, I would do that. No, we saw her do it. It's in the books, right? I don't mean like in the book, like Game of Thrones. I mean, it's done and accounted for. When it came down to it, yeah, she put herself between that blade, no question. And I never really thought about that as a lesser version of her eventual fate. I don't know that George intended that as a setup either, but it certainly works that way, right? She has that dagger almost cut her throat. She gets away from it, and then the dagger does cut her throat at the Red Wedding. And in both cases, it's a kind of an unimportant person, right? It's the footpad that Joffrey probably hired to send to kill Bran. We don't even know what that guy's name is. It doesn't even matter. And the Frey that killed her is like Raymond? Not Ryman, Raymond. One of the unimportant, I mean, a lot of them are kind of unimportant, but one of the Freys that you only hear name spoken a few times. It wasn't like Black Walder or Edmund or any of the more famous ones. It's just one random Frey. So again, it was Joffrey's work almost certainly, but Cat was, of course, led to believe it was Tyrion. But that almost doesn't matter because Joffrey, Tyrion, either way, it's a Lannister, and she doesn't really have nuance about these things these days as far as we can tell. So any Lannister is worth killing. I think that is where we could say her mind is at these days. A hidden layer here is Catelyn's mother, Minissa Went, whom she remembers as having a warm smile and soft hands, which is not much else she has to remember because she didn't know her mother. Her mother died young, when she was young. But Stoneheart's hands are torn up and scarred, and she's no longer warm. She's as cold as stone, and her grim visage is certainly not a warm smile. So she has become more the opposite of her mother, I guess, than you could say that she was the opposite of herself. There's still a lot of Catelyn in Lady Stoneheart, but comparing her to her mother, which, to be fair, there's very little detail here, but it does appear to be pretty much the opposite. Undead Unfinished. Both Beric and Catelyn are seemingly made more single-minded in Undeath, as if trying to finish the unfinished. Beric continued to bring justice to the smallfolk. He was sort of still on the mission he was originally sent out on. Catelyn literally died a moment after killing a Frey in revenge for them killing her son. So that's still what she's involved in. But Stoneheart is also highly interested in finding Arya. It's not just about the revenge, it's also about the rescuing her child. Now, what would she do if she finds Arya? That's a tough question. Like, she can't like be a mother to her. Does she just want her to be safe? And is that enough? Like, what is her end game with finding Arya? I mean, as a mother, you want to find your kid. You don't need an end game there, but this is just so different because this is an undead mom. Like, it's just, she's just not the same person. So she would surely give up a lot for her family, even in this state. We saw her do it in life. She would surely do it in death. But if it's not Arya or one of her other family members, it's just kill, kill, kill. You know, revenge, kill, murder, Freys, Lannisters, Boltons. Boltons are kind of out of range for her right now. We'll talk about that a little more later. But Lannisters and Freys, there's plenty of them around. Now, Harwin, at the time, what we're told is Harwin begged Thoros to give her the kiss of life. And Thoros is like, I don't know about that. Look at her. Like, she's been in the water for 3 days. I'm not doing that. He says, I don't want to do that. But Beric did. He brought her back, passing the life force of himself. And there's a couple of aspects to that, which is maybe a little more about Beric than about her. He had been expressing how he's tired of it. You know, this existence is becoming torturous for him. He can't remember who he is. He doesn't have an identity. He is slipping more and more into maybe a tropey undead version, like the kind of mindless. Not that he ever became fully mindless, but he was slipping towards that, and he recognized it. He recognized he was already kind of inhuman and getting more and more like that, and that's not a very good place to be. So I wonder if he had considered that before, if there's anybody else he considered passing the gift on to. And when did he even learn he could do that? Like, where did that come from? For Thoros, it was something he had done a bunch of times as a ritual, and then it just worked. Beric just somehow knew he could pass that on to her. That's an interesting little puzzle, isn't it? So he was willing to give himself up and for her, and she rose. What this is like, I mean, what must everybody have thought? Now, she isn't dying repeatedly, so that's a different thing that they have between them. She may still have a tortured existence. She might be in pain a lot, like physical pain, as I said. Obviously, she's not happy with what happened to her family. That's torturous too. Just day to day, living with the knowledge that happened. So that's crucial, because if she were losing her memories, then maybe some of that would fade. She's not, though. She has not died a single time. Now, that raises two other questions. Later in the episode, we're going to consider the idea of her passing her life force onto somebody else, like paying it forward yet again. It goes from Beric to Stoneheart to, well, I don't know who that third person would be. There's a few candidates, but... And the other concept here is she gonna, if something gonna happen to her when, like, is there an end state? Is there some sort of like, oh, I've done what I came back for, so I can just pass on, right? Is that even a possibility? Like, is that where this is headed? And of course, the other question that this addresses is it gives us fodder and theory material to work with for how it might go for Jon Snow. Now, here's when Brienne meets her. Quote,
"A trestle table had been set up across the cave, in a cleft in the rock. Behind it sat a woman all in gray, cloaked and hooded. In her hands was a crown, a bronze circlet ringed by iron swords. She was studying it, her fingers stroking the blades as if to test their sharpness. Her eyes glimmered under her hood. Gray was the color of the Silent Sisters, the handmaidens of the stranger. Brienne felt a shiver climb her spine. Stoneheart.
Indeed, that's the implication behind that particular nickname of hers, one of many, the Silent Sister. Very fitting, right? The Silent Sisters work with the dead and they don't talk. Now, Catelyn can talk a little bit, but of course it's very difficult for her and it's hard to understand even when she is managing. And of course she dresses in gray, so that matches as well. That's what the Silent Sisters do. And of all the 7, well, it's pretty easy to say which of the 7 she most identifies with. And it's not the mother and it's not the crone, even though she's got elements of both of them. It's the stranger. Yeah, it's definitely the stranger. Nina had a good comparison here. It's like those people that have to use the talk box they've just smoked too many cigarettes and they have had surgery or a hole poked in their neck to be able to talk properly, and it's the sound comes through there. It's like that, but without the technology. It's a hole in your throat you can still communicate through. Like she has to pinch the slash closed in order to get sound to come out, and even then it's difficult. So that's just even the way she talks, the logistics behind her using her voice is creative and terrifying. George is so clever with that sort of thing. So she represents death and the unknown, which is why I think the stranger is the best pairing there. Now, of course, that's Robb's crown she's looking at. She's checking it out. It's the bronze circlet ringed by iron swords. She must be remembering what happened and just thinking about Robb and vengeance and maybe remembering what it was like to be his mother. Just who knows what's going through her head, but she's clearly moved by it. And this isn't an idle moment. She's just gotten this crown. When Brienne meets her, Stoneheart has just returned from Fairmarket. It's not necessarily obvious what that means. We find out in a different chapter that Ryman Frey and his escort were hanged at Fairmarket, and Ryman Frey had the crown. Yes. So, in fact, Ryman Frey was being petty, I believe. What happens is Ryman is doing a terrible job leading the siege against Riverrun, and he's cavorting with a sex worker, and he's placed Robb's crown on her head. She's wearing the crown when Jaime walks up, and he's like, what the hell is going on here? He embarrasses Ryman, tells him to get the hell out of here, go back home, gives charge to his son Edwin instead, and nicknames this sex worker the Queen of Whores. He's like, you can take your Queen of Whores with you, but the crown stays. Well, clearly the crown did not stay. Ryman, I guess, perturbed or his pride stung at Jaime's treatment of him, was like, well, I'm keeping the crown. Screw you, man. No, you're not. You're getting hanged, and Stoneheart has the crown now. So that's maybe something that was easy to miss. Like, I think most people caught that was Robb's crown, but you might not have caught how the journey that the crown took to get to her. But Brienne doesn't recognize it. She's never seen it. She was never in Robb's presence. More importantly, she doesn't recognize her. She doesn't know this is Catelyn. She just knows this is Stoneheart. She's heard about Stoneheart, but has yet to make the connection. But here is the reveal. Quote,
Lady Stoneheart lowered her hood and unwound the gray wool scarf from her face. Her hair was dry and brittle, white as bone. Her brow was mottled green and gray, spotted with the brown blooms of decay. The flesh of her face clung in ragged strips from her eyes down to her jaw. Some of the rips were crusted with dried blood, but others gaped open to reveal the skull beneath. I got thrown because it was a poem for a second there.
Yeah.
Green and gray with brown blooms of decay.
Yeah, George is so good at that, but ugh. Yeah, his ability to describe things his description is something I haven't read a few other novels lately, and it's something I'm always keeping track of, is comparing George's writing style to other people's. It's not always just in the front of my mind, but it comes up from time to time. And just his ability to be poetic with his descriptions, I think something that really stands out, that other people just don't bother with as many descriptions as he does. And when they do, they're a lot more straightforward. They're a lot more mundane. But yeah, this is just like even if you got this, even if this imagery stuck with you, having the words read to you again to reshape that vision is like, yeah, it's just really powerful. So Brienne didn't know who it was until this moment. She's like, oh my God, it's Catelyn. And she's not as terrified as Merritt because she isn't being threatened with hanging. Well, she is, but she doesn't know it. She doesn't know how much danger she's in at this point because she doesn't know that's Catelyn. That's part of why she doesn't know. And what is, switching POVs here, what is going through Stoneheart's mind in this moment too, when she is reunited with Brienne and is confronted with what looks like pretty damning evidence against Brienne. We know better. We know very thoroughly better. We've been in her head. We've seen Jaime's reactions and in his head. We know both of them are sincere. But obviously that nuance is very far from clear here, even if it would matter. So here's what Stoneheart is doing while we're wondering what's going through her head. Quote.
She studied the sword, the parchment, the bronze and iron crown. Finally, she reached up under her jaw and grasped her neck, as if she meant to throttle herself. Instead, she spoke. Her voice was halting, broken, tortured. The sound seemed to come from her throat. Part croak, part wheeze, part death rattle. The language of the damned, thought Brienne.
Yeah, I almost wish they had put that on TV. What would that have sounded like? They could have done some clever things with that. So even the sound of her voice is horrifying. Merritt Frey didn't really deal with that. It was enough for him, but he didn't actually hear her attempt to speak. It's like pursing her lips to whistle, but it's your neck she has to purse, and it's a wheeze, not a whistle, or a death rattle, or a croak, as it says. There's a vague similarity to Roose Bolton here. Symbolic, maybe, or maybe just the way it works out. The gravity of the speaker here, which is that he doesn't speak inhumanly, but he intentionally speaks very softly, so people have to strain to hear him. It's a form of power. He's like, you have to work harder to hear what I'm saying, but you have to hear what I'm saying, because I'm a lord. So you can't just ignore me. So, yeah, he's exerting his will over people in kind of a petty manner. Catelyn isn't doing that on purpose. It's the only choice she has. But it has the same effect. It has the same gravity as everybody has to really... You have to pay very close attention and concentrate just to even hear what she's saying. Now, she also has some help. Harwin is basically, to borrow a concept from the Lord of the Rings, she's like the mouth. He's like the mouth of Stoneheart, but not really. The mouth of Sauron is a human that is an independent being that has his own goals and is very cunning independently. But he was Sauron's like ambassador in a sense. This is just, Harwin isn't really an ambassador. He's just translating. Rumors. Brienne and Sir Hyle, before, of course, they are captured, discuss where the Hound, of course, not knowing who the Hound is at this point, might be. Quote.
Dondarrion's men are looking for him, too. They have put out word that they mean to hang him for what he did at Salt Pans. They had no part of that. Lord Randall is putting it about that they did in hopes of turning the commons against Beric and his brotherhood. He will never take the Lightning Lord so long as the smallfolk are protecting him. And there's this other band, led by this woman, Stoneheart, Lord Beric's lover, according to one tale. Supposedly, she was hanged by the Freys, but Dondarrion kissed her and brought her back to life, and now she cannot die, no more than he can.
You can just look at this and see how the truth turned into rumor. The kiss of life, well, like, oh, he kissed her? Then maybe they had a relationship, right? You can see how that turns into Lord Beric's lover because of the kissing, right? And if they're both leading bands of the Brotherhood, you could see maybe there's some sort of equality there. But of course, this is all wrong. She wasn't hanged by them. Close enough. You know, her neck was slashed. It was, they say they had the part of the body right. And Dondarrion isn't even there anymore. There is two groups, though. That one of them is not necessarily a group so much as the people that left the Brotherhood, and some of them are still together, maybe going to Starfall with Edric Dane. Shout out to our Edric Dane episode from recently. But I don't know that we can call them a group as a whole, but they are the members that left. There is, you know, we can call them a group in that sense, but I don't know that they're a group in that they're all together. They're ironically actually following remnants of the Bloody Mummers. The Salt Pans raid, as I said before, was done by Rorge, wearing the Hound's helmet, which good because they wanted to kill the Bloody Mummers. That's part of bringing justice to the Riverlands is getting rid of those folk. We saw that long ago when Beric was alive. They would definitely take on the Bloody Mummers whenever they could. So it's notable that people see it that way because it's important for us readers to be kept abreast of what the rumors are. We know basic truths here, but it's important to know what other people think, that they think that there's a Stoneheart and a Beric out there. And I don't know what would convince them that there is no Beric. It might just be a matter of time. And like they go a year passes and they haven't seen him again. No one's reported him. They might start to be like, okay, maybe Beric isn't around anymore. Maybe something happened to him. Maybe he died. And we just, as news of him just never comes again. On the other hand, someone could tell stories and say Beric did this, Beric did that, just like how Randall Tarley is making up stories about how it was the Brotherhood that sacked Salt Pans. So lies can go a long way here. Propaganda from either side could make a difference. And we know that that was a big deal when Arthur Dayne defeated the Kingswood Brotherhood. It was partly because he turned the smallfolk against them. And that's addressed here. It says Lord Tarley will never catch Beric and the Brotherhood as long as the smallfolk are on their side. If the smallfolk are on his side, on Tarley's side, then he's got a huge advantage. But Tarley winning over the smallfolk, that's not his strong suit, is it? And as we said before, he's not even working on it anymore. So, yeah, I do wonder what about how many people left. We know names of people who left, but we don't have numbers. We do know that the Brotherhood's numbers swelled pretty substantially during the earlier portions before Stoneheart. Now, we know that her leading them in a darker direction, some people left, but we really don't have numbers. We don't have a total picture of what their numbers are, let alone what their numbers dropped to afterwards. But it should still be pretty substantial. I mean, we're told that Tarley has hanged dozens of them. Well, and they're still operating as they were before. It doesn't seem to have slowed them down. Like they still killed Ryman Frey after that. So, or during that, you know? So it seems like they might have more numbers than it seems, but like a lot of revolutionary cells, they aren't foolish enough to all be in the same place at the same time so that they can't all be captured all at once. Like they can't they can't make it that easy for their enemies to end the whole group. What is a Revenant? Let's talk about that concept. The title of this episode includes that term. I've been throwing that term around with relation to her for about as long as we've been doing this show. Here's our chance to discuss it in a little more detail. First of all, a quote from Thoros.
Lightning comes and goes and then is seen no more. So too with men. Lord Beric's fire has gone out of this world, I fear. A grimmer shadow leads us in his place.
A grimmer shadow. So he's referring to Beric as a shadow also, because grimmer shadow, they're both shadows. He was just a less grim shadow. And they're both undead, so fair point, right? I guess that works. Now, and that's, of course, part of Thoros' issue here, is he believes all this is the work of R'hllor, and he can't leave as long as that's the case. He's the one whose action raised Beric, and then that in turn raised Stoneheart, so he's got to see it through. Now, in many real-life traditions, the term ghost and revenant are interchangeable. Not always. It's often, though, unfinished business. It isn't always justice. That's a very common one, though. Sometimes it's just something incomplete. The person was trying to do something really important to them, and maybe they died in the process of that, or someone stopped them in some tragic way. George inverting this trope a bit with Beric was that he became even more about justice after his death, but not justice for himself, justice for everyone else. He would put himself last almost in that. And justice, of course, is stretched a bit to include things like a right to eat, which I think a lot of us would say, okay, fair point. A starving person is going to ignore justice, right? Or going to ignore the law because survival is more important than obeying the law to 99% of people. And I wouldn't argue that they have a burden to follow the law when their life is on the line in such a circumstances. So I think, which is kind of gets to a greater point about why everyone needs to eat. But with Stoneheart, it's of course not that. She's not trying to feed the small folk as far as we know. It's not about justice. It's about vengeance. Now, so a lot of ghosts or revenants, when their purpose is complete, they go away. They end. They can be at rest. Whether it's someone else has to do it for them, like a ghost that haunts a house, the ghost isn't going to finish the job. They're just a tortured soul stuck in the plane of existence where they first existed, rather than passing on to the afterlife. So someone else has to solve that problem for them, whether it's proper burial or bringing a murderer to justice. Sometimes the Revenant actually goes after the person that did this. So there's a lot of variations on this around many different traditions, around many different cultures all around the world. But there are a lot of overlaps in commonality, whether you're talking about Revenants / ghosts from like Japan or South Africa or Native Americans. It's just, there's a lot of overlap with what people believe. Like there's just common enough beliefs that the dead can return. Spirits, souls, things like that. Those are ubiquitous beliefs across a lot of cultures, even if there's pretty substantial differences in how those beliefs manifest. The baseline is similar. There's some sort of life after death. There's some sort of way our bodies or spirits, whatever, continue. It's all related, right? So back as far as 4000 BC, humans have unearthed the graves of much older humans from 6,000 plus years ago that show anti-revenant measures. Ways to keep the corpse from rising, like rocks placed on top of a body just to keep it down, or like mesh wire above the ground or things like that. Some of these are for anti-vampirism things, but they're all related in that sense. It's just preventing the undead from coming back. They're in Roman literature. Revenants are in Roman literature. They're in Polish literature. They're in Celtic folklore. You can't really say Celtic literature because there isn't much of that written down from back then. Celtic folklore is written down now quite a bit, but back then not so much. In Norse, there's the concept of the Draugr. There was a Draugr in the movie The Northman. The other name for Norse name for the undead is an Apterganger, which just means again walker. So it's like, hey, it's walking again after death. The movie Revenant with Leonardo DiCaprio is based on a book called Revenant, a novel of revenge. Yeah, there you go. Now, of course, that movie is not based on a dead person. But it's based on a person left for dead. So it's kind of symbolic or metaphorical. And this person comes back and, puts things to right in a sense. So this raises, pun intended, an important question. Stoneheart doesn't go into battle. She hasn't been killed repeatedly like Beric was. We talked about that before in relation to memories, but what about just, can she, if she is killed somehow, could she rise again? I assume so, since Beric kept doing it, but it wasn't Beric rising on his own. It was Thoros like reinvigorating him somehow. She would give him the kiss of life again. He didn't just stand back up on his own. He had to have Thoros bring him back. Thoros said he wouldn't bring her back when Harwin first asked, but has he changed his mind now that he's seen what happened, now that she's leading them and has them on a new mission? Would he still be like, no, I'm not bringing her back? I think maybe he's changed his mind and this time he would. But that's an interesting conundrum, an interesting question. Maybe Thoros would be just like, nope, let's just let her be at rest. We're done with that. The concept of a lich is somewhat overlapped here too. The word lich derives from Old English. It just means corpse, really. But in fantasy is where liches are a lot more common. Fantasy fiction, like things like Stranger Things, but obviously well before that too. The idea is basically a sorcerer or wizard, some sort of magic user who makes themselves undead in order to achieve immortality. They can't make themselves living immortal, so they go undead immortal. And this is generally done via sacrificing your soul or your spirit. That's kind of the undertone of it all, which is kind of the opposite here. Beric gave his soul to Catelyn. He didn't sacrifice it. He passed it on. It's not his soul. It's for lack of a better term. It's whatever was keeping him walking around, whatever power, whatever that you call that, semi-immortal. We also have the term Lichyard used in A Song of Ice and Fire, which is not, just a Westerosi thing. That's a real term that's been around. It isn't really used anymore, but it just means graveyard. So nothing special there. There's also Lich Gates in the real world, and that's just that's an old concept. It isn't really around anymore, but maybe it is in some places. Maybe not so much in the Western world, I think, because it's where a body is kept before burial. Now we keep those in the morgue. So it's also where, if there's a funeral procession entering a cemetery, it's the gate they would enter by. It's where the procession enters the cemetery. A broken brotherhood. Yeah, at one point, Thoros calls them that. He's like, yeah, we're a broken brotherhood now. He's lamenting what they used to be, that their purpose isn't what it used to be, their leadership has changed, their day-to-day living has gotten a lot harder. Yeah. Here's a memorable quote we've quoted before, because it's a great quote to quote. Thoros to Brienne quoth.
I remember justice. It had a pleasant taste. Justice was what we were about when Beric led us, or so we told ourselves. We were king's men, knights, and heroes. But some nights are dark and full of terror, my lady. War makes monsters of us all.
Brienne's follow-up is, so you're monsters? And she's, no, we're human. He's very quick to, he's like, look, it's making us monsters, but we're that way because we're human. We were transitioned to that because of what we've experienced, not because of what we chose. Some of it's choice, but most of it is, trying to be good and the path of good leading to this. War made monsters of them all before Stoneheart came along. He would have said something similar, maybe with a little more optimism, maybe with a little more of his faith powering his energy behind all this, but the sentiment would still be pretty similar. When they were helping peasants, they could at least feel good about themselves. They were helping somebody. This is just being part of the murder squad. This isn't the same thing, right? It changes you even when you begin as the good guys. Just going around killing people, that disregard for life and lack of nuance and all that. It's just, you can't be who you were if you're doing that. I don't know if you all caught the wordplay here from Thoros. If you certainly didn't if you were listening to the audiobook. He says we were king's men, knights, and heroes, but some nights are dark and full of terror. He says knights with a K, as in some knights ordained in the light of the Seven, or in the case of the Knights of the Hollow Hill, under R'hllor. So he's saying, even knights who swear holy vows and begin their lives as good people and set out to do good and honor and justice, they can end up like this with the right circumstance, or the wrong circumstances. I was perusing the Westeros.org forums and found a great take from user Curled Finger, thanks Curled Finger, who said this of the BWB. They are the stifled outrage of the people in villages and castles. They are the embodiment of all the hope left in the Midlands of a continent decimated by war facing winter. Well said, and I agree with that. I couldn't put it better. Very succinct. And even more under Stoneheart, they're like that. They are under Beric. It was more of a righteous outrage. This is vengeance. Again, it's more vindictive. It's still somewhat righteous, but it's a much darker version of it. It's not the kind that you would want to live under afterwards. It's a temporary thing. What Beric was trying to do was something that you would carry forward. Even in peacetime, you would want to do as Beric did. But this is Well, war makes monsters of us all, and we're seeing that through. And this includes some nobility, too, by the way. It's not just the knights and some small folk and people who aren't lords and ladies that have been supporting Beric. And, like, Lady Smallwood, for example, right? That's a big one. Probably the most notable name we can point to for certain. We have suspicions that other lords, especially in the Riverlands, have been helping the Brotherhood. How does this impact their support of the Brotherhood? On one hand, if they know who that is, if they know it's Catelyn, they might be more likely to do something because she was unjustly murdered. Her story is tragic, and it's the kind of thing that a lot of nobility would stand up for. This because they see the life of a noble lady like Catelyn is very important. It's an offense when something like this happens. So, but is she still with them? This is the kind of thing we don't know. Whether we know that Anguy and Edric and some others left, but it's implied that others are no longer helping the Brotherhood. But we don't know whether Lady Smallwood is one of those who is left, or maybe she's doubled down on her support. Who knows? Maybe she's all about it now. It's like, actually, I like this angrier, more vindictive, bloodier version of the Brotherhood. She might actually like that, because she really hates the Freys also, or something like that, or the Lannisters. So Catelyn's never any sort of war leader, let alone an outlaw. This is a new life for her. Beric, it wasn't quite as different because, he was chosen for this mission because he was someone that had experience. He's a knight. He had fought in war. He had learned how to be a warrior, which means learning how to fight ambushes and learning how to deal with ambushes and scouting and all these other things that were not part of Catelyn's upbringing or her adult experience. That when she got attacked on the high road by the mountain clans while trying to take Tyrion to the Eyrie, that was probably the first time she was in a fight, like up close, where she was a direct target of the people in the battle. Other than that, she watched the Battle of the Stone Mill from atop Riverlands walls, which was actually after this, and she wasn't a direct participant. She's just watching from the walls. So I think that's it. I don't think she has any other combat experience except for what she's since acquired with the Brotherhood, which doesn't involve her wielding a sword, but it probably does involve her learning things about ambushes and tactics and how to run a outlaw cell or an outlaw organization and all the things that go with that, keeping people separate, communication, spying, all the different things that they're engaged with all over the Riverlands. That all became her responsibility. And yeah, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? That she's a much different kind of leader, yet it's still somewhat straightforward why they follow her. She's a lady. She's the wife of the man that sent them out in the first place. And her story is just so tragic. It's just the kind of thing that demands justice. What happened to her, even if you have nothing to do with it, you hear that and you go, damn, that was really unfair. That's really, the Freys violated guest right. That's awful, right? She's the victim of that. So, and and everybody knows all her children have been killed, even though that's not accurate. She has lost children, and she has that, she's dealing with those feelings, even though it's not true, which is still pretty heavy. She perceives it as truth. So it's very different. Here's Brienne waking up, coming to after being captured and kind of finding out what her predicament is. It's pretty interesting. Quote.
Renly stood behind the girl, pushing his black hair out of his eyes. Not Renly, Gendry.
Milady means for you to answer for your crimes.
Milady. The wine was making her head spin. It was hard to think. Stoneheart, is that who you mean? Lord Randall had spoken of her back at Maidenpool. Lady Stoneheart.
Some call her that. Some call her other things. The Silent Sister, Mother Merciless, the Hangwoman. That is an implication. Obviously, we know what those names imply. The killing, the vengeance, some version of justice. But the implication that I'm getting at here isn't these different nicknames. It's how quickly she seems to have acquired them. Her reputation has spread very quickly because well, it's quite a story, isn't it? It's this being, this mysterious, murderous woman who came from nowhere that most people don't know who she is. Very few people do. It's something that the readers know a lot better than the people in world. But Gendry has seen a lot of this. Gendry knows who she is, and he's listing off all these nicknames. So he has seen some of this. She doesn't have those nicknames for nothing. These are not just rumors. We know she's been hanging people. That's a fact. So he's a valuable member of the Brotherhood. So he's got maybe gained a little bit of clout within the organization because might be their only blacksmith, or at least one of them. So she's got 4 nicknames already. These are pretty good nicknames, right? Randall Tarley has caused them a lot of problems, as I said before. He's hanged quite a few of them, but no big names. As far as we know, there weren't any names we recognized have been hanged by him. It wouldn't be surprised if he's a bit Maegor-ish with his methods, meaning he's executing people that really don't have that much to do with it. Maybe they just have a tangential relationship to the Brotherhood. Maybe they were in the same village that the Brotherhood got some food from. They may not have even helped or participated in that. But hey, you're in the village where this food was given to the Brotherhood. You must be guilty. So, of course, with things like that, how is anyone going to win over the loyalty of the smallfolk when they're doing that kind of thing? Yeah, Randall Tarley, he's good at killing and soldiering and fighting, but this aspect of the campaign kind of eludes him. But again, irrelevant. He's no longer part of the campaign. He's moved on. But it still left them with all these things. It's still his time hunting them had a big impact on who they were and how they operate. Now, remember what Tywin did. This is a similar thing. Tywin hanged Masha Heddle. Masha Heddle, if you recall, is the proprietor of the Inn of the Crossroads. She had nothing to do with Tyrion getting seized by Catelyn. She, in fact, tried to stop it. She's like, don't do this here. But because it happened at the Inn of the Crossroads, she's responsible, so Tywin hanged her. Tarley is exactly that sort of man. He would do the same thing. He would like, okay, you were connected to this, even though it wasn't through your own actions. You're going to die. So yeah, this is what we saw him doing at Maidenpool. When he was dishing out justice, he had similar thing. Like his versions of justice were extremely brutal, extremely harsh, and probably not as effective as they could be. Now, Gendry's identity, as a side topic here, what a thing for them to learn about. Whether it's Stoneheart learning or everybody or whatever. The son of the king of their original mission. You see that with Brienne briefly thinking it's Renly. Like, wait, that's not Renly, it's Gendry. But damn, he looks like Renly. That, maybe they haven't really noticed that part of it, that he looks so much like Robert. I don't know. A lot of them maybe didn't even have that familiarity with what Robert looked like. But they always talk about how they were king's men. Maybe they don't talk about that so much anymore under Stoneheart, but they haven't forgotten. He is that king's son. So... yeah, it's right there. They just don't have the information. Neither does he. And Renly doesn't know. I mean, Gendry doesn't know who he is. So, So they did get a major target. We mentioned this briefly before, but let's go through it a little more in detail. The heir to the twins. Here's Jaime speaking to Walder Rivers.
Has some ill befallen Sir Ryman?
Hanged with all his party,
said Walder Rivers.
The outlaws caught them 2 leagues south of Fairmarket.
Dondarrion?
Him, or Thoros, or this woman Stoneheart. Edwin Frey has a different theory, that it's Black Walder. Black Walder is trying to climb the ladder to be Lord of the Twins. Edwin Frey's not wrong to be wary of Black Walder, but he isn't guilty in this particular case. And you can still see them blaming things on Dondarrion. They still, of course, they don't know. More evidence of that. So a few questions as we move our way into the second half of this episode. Can they last like this as they keep getting darker and farther away from their original mission and living harder and harder and becoming more and more like broken men? Remember what Sandor called them when they were still under Beric's control. He said, you're the sorriest lot of broken men and outlaws, blah, 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 blah. They're way worse now, right? I mean, they're more dangerous in some ways, more violent, but they might also be sorrier in that regard. So yeah, how long can they go like this? How long can this persist? It does not have the makings of a long-term organization, does it? we rely on your support. We are a 2-person operation, 2.5 maybe. Hey, folks, Sean is going to be coming back for the TV season. And that's who we are. So we, like I said, we rely on y'all. We wouldn't be here without you, and we wouldn't be able to do this. So if you want to support us, there's a couple of different ways. The main one, of course, is Patreon. You go there and you get bonus episodes. You get access to our scripts and notes. You can get shout-outs and things like that. Extra news from us, insider stuff, voting on episodes, all sorts of things. We try to give back as much as we can, make that worth your while, in addition to just the knowledge that you're supporting a show that you watch or listen to on a regular basis. So very much we would appreciate that and very much need it. historyofwesteros.com is our website, but you can also go straight to Patreon. It's patreon.com/historyofwesteros. There's a great Audible holiday promotion going on right now. I listen to lots of audiobooks. Audible is my main platform for that. 1 book a month for the subscription fee is pretty solid. It's a low price for a book that I get hours of listening out of. I do use Audible to re-listen to A Song of Ice and Fire. I am currently on a re-listen. I'm currently in A Feast for Crows. Pretty early in it, maybe like chapter 8 or so. And I'm enjoying it as much as always, learning new things, remembering old things, brushing myself up. It's great. But they have a promotion, like I said, right now. If you sign up for Audible during before the end of 2026, or sorry, end of 2025, it's only 99 cents for the first 3 months. And you could theoretically just take those 3 months and then bail. I don't recommend that because the deal stays good afterwards, even though it's more, but you could absolutely get 3 books for $3 across 3 months and just call it a day. You could also start with a free trial. If you sign up on Audible and start with a trial, you get a free book as well. So you could get quite a lot out of this, up to 4, maybe 5 books for only about $3. And that's it. If you do stay on and become a regular subscriber, that's great too. You'll enjoy a lot of great books, a lot of great Audible books out there. It's becoming more and more common. Almost every book becomes an audiobook these days. And hey, when you're on the go, it's a great way to still be reading or listening. You know, I prefer to sit down and read, but you just can't always do that. Here's a few questions from y'all. History of Westeros from Tony Sled says, what do you think of Lady Mormont's role will be going forward, and Tytos Blackwood for that matter? Oh, interesting question. Yeah, Lady Mormont, are we talking about Lyanna Mormont, or are we talking about one of the others? Because we have Mage Mormont.
I think they're talking about Mage. They're talking about the idea that Robb's administrative council is still at large.
Yeah. Well, I would certainly recommend our episode on Robb, the Riddle of Robb's Will, for a lot of that. But yeah, I think that there's still a lot of loyalty there. They're lying low because their opportunity isn't there. But at the same time, some of them may have learned about Rickon, that Rickon is alive and that Manderly is doing his thing. Manderly would want to tell other people that he perceives as Stark loyalists about this because he would want help. And he would want to build that group, build this resistance group. Not just, he doesn't want to just do it by himself, right? So Tytos Blackwood could be involved in this. But he's a little distant from the north, obviously. I think he's more likely to be aligned with the Brotherhood, especially if they're going to start targeting things like Jaime's party that he sent with Sir Forley Prester to lead Edmure Tully and Jane Westerling to Casterly Rock, for example. Widely theorized that group will be ambushed. Something we'll talk about a little bit in the second half as well. So, yeah, Tytos Blackwood, very honorable, very loyal. He just had to surrender because he had no choice. He was completely beaten, and he was being threatened. His family's being threatened. Like, what's he going to do? He can only stay loyal. He can only go that far. But given the chance, I think he'll come right back. That said, winter is coming, and Tytos and a lot of the Riverlands, they are more distracted by the need to find food to get through the winter than they might be concerned with the war. Or maybe it's just two things pulling them in separate directions. So they've got a lot on their plates. And, well, they don't have enough on their plates, food-wise. So that's why they have to worry about that. Urias Tosh says, Stoneheart gets captured by an enemy. What happens then? I can see Qyburn having her studied in his dungeons. Woo! Yeah, that's an interesting thought. I definitely hadn't thought about Qyburn. Yeah, because he's obviously studied Gregor, and he's going down that necromantic path path of sorts. So, yeah, he would be very curious to get his hands on her. I don't think it'll happen, but man, he would want to. He really wants to experiment on her. He's like, wow, what's going on here? Tell me, I need to learn more. Great thought, your eyes, Tosh. Very creepy, though. A Storm of Swords appreciation. Let's talk about that briefly. At the beginning, I mentioned how her appearance, I don't mean her physical appearance, I mean her just popping up in the story, in a book full of surprises and climaxes and payoffs, is arguably one of the least expected, if not the least expected. I don't necessarily mean the most shocking or the most impactful, because that's probably the Red Wedding. But just in terms of out of nowhere, like, you might imagine Thoros bringing her back because Arya asked about bringing Ned back, and so that might have entered your mind at some point, but you wouldn't have been able to guess that Beric could pass it on. I don't think that was completely out of nowhere. The idea that Beric could, pay it forward, give himself up for her, that we had no idea that was possible. Tyrion killing Tywin, you can kind of see it coming, like not far ahead necessarily, but when he's in his room with the crossbow, you can kind of okay, I can see where this is going. He might actually kill him. You don't know for sure it's going to happen when you're reading it the first time, but it isn't a complete surprise when he pulls that trigger. Like, oh, wow, it really did happen, but you've perceived the possibility by that point. The Red Viper losing was pretty surprising and unexpected, not just in general, but it seems like he had won. He had seemed to have won, and then, oops, he didn't. So that's kind of up there. The Red Wedding, like I said, it's probably the most shocking, the most out of the ordinary for an author to put in there in terms of a plot direction, but there's a lot of foreshadowing for it. You might have caught on, and you could see the danger there. You might not have thought it would go that far, but with Grey Wind's warning and the drums and the rain and so many other things, just the straightforwardness of Walder Frey's personality and his vindictiveness and his pride, you might not have thought it would go that far, but you might have seen something coming. Jaime losing his hand, that's up there, because you really didn't see that coming. Jaime didn't Jaime's inner narrative pushes back against the idea of what's about to happen. He's like, they're just trying to scare me. And you might believe him in that moment. I mean, it's just one sentence. You're not sitting here scrutinizing every single thing that's said. And then the next sentence is, oh, wow, that really did happen. So it does turn pretty quickly. Joffrey's poisoning, it's up there too. It's fairly sudden. People want to kill this kid. He's awful. But the actual moment that it happens is like, oh, there it is. It's pretty sudden when it does happen. But it's still, there's he's coughing slowly and he starts to choke and he's like, oh my goodness, this is happening. It isn't that he just drops dead. Sam killing an other, that's pretty darn surprising, but that's not really climactic because it's like the first third of the book. So maybe that's a specious argument against how important it is, but it isn't. It's hard to call that climactic. It's just a big, big moment. Mormont's death is also pretty sudden, but the Night's Watch were dropping like flies at that time. Maybe the manner of it was a little surprising, but I don't know. It's not as big as Stoneheart to me. Cold Hands. All right, that's up there. That's up there. Just, whoa, who is this? And especially because it's not Benjen. That was a pretty big follow-up surprise. Stannis showing up at the wall. That's a pretty big one, too. That's hard to see coming. Just all of a sudden, his knights are charging at the free folk. Like, Jon is just chatting with Mance, and you're learning who Mance is. You're distracted by, this is the first time you've seen Mance on screen, or not the first time, but one of the first times. And he's having this conversation with Jon about different things. They're arguing, and Jon's trying to figure out just how much to tell him. And then all of a sudden, boom, Stannis attacks. Yeah, that's pretty surprising. And the last one I have notated here, maybe I missed one or two because there's just so many big climactic moments in the Storm of Swords, is the Littlefinger reveal that he's the one behind Sansa's rescue. That's more of, if you hadn't figured that out, which at the time, my first read, I hadn't, it was like, oh, of course it's him, right? Like, right, of course it's Littlefinger. But you don't go, oh, of course Catelyn came back as an undead revenant. Yeah, obviously, of course that was gonna, no one did that. No one said that. The path of the Hangwoman. Let's try to sketch out her movement somewhat. after her rise, ending with where we know her to be at the end of the books, which is with Brienne having led Jaime into their clutches. And that's somewhere between Riverrun and the Twins. We don't exactly know where, or sorry, not Riverrun and the Twins, Riverrun and Raventree Hall, because it's after Jaime leaves Raventree Hall on his way back to Riverrun where he is accosted and tricked into going off with her. It must have been a awkward moment if we're going back to when she became their leader. Many of the Brotherhood would have seen Beric give his life for it. They would have witnessed this. They would have been standing there going, wait, what is he doing? And then he just flops on the ground as the life force leaves him and she rises. Just what a strange thing to witness. So they would know for sure. There's no doubt. He's gone. He's done. They probably buried him. They had literally just seen the wolves running off. They know that these are bodies. They're not going to leave his body there. They probably wouldn't do that anyway, but especially not with wolves near around. They would give him a proper burial. Now, how exactly did she take charge? You know, she's not like she can't give some big speech, right? I think it just comes down to they fell into line because she's of the nobility. She was sort of ordained by Beric. Like he's their leader and he passed this on to her. He sort of nominated her in a sense. And Thoros followed immediately, and Thoros is kind of like the de facto second in command, kind of the heart and soul of the whole organization. Even though they've gone so dark, obviously he's seen it through, and that alone encourages others to see it through. I think I may have said that before, but Thoros is the most recognizable leader of the Brotherhood these days. The one who is still somewhat human. I mean, human in, I don't mean that in a literal sense, because obviously she's not entirely human. That's not what I mean. I mean, like being a person, acting like with sympathy and empathy and living, not being a broken man or woman. Harwin was almost certainly one of her biggest advocates. Harwin was the son of the master at Horse at Winterfell. He grew up with Catelyn Stark as the highest ranking woman in his life. Only Ned Stark was higher. So he grew up with her as an authority figure. And in Westeros, they teach you to love the nobility, even if it isn't something that necessarily comes naturally. They impart that. And so he probably had some pretty genuine love for her. Maybe love isn't the right word, but dedication, devotion, maybe better. So he was not unlikely one of the people that quickly got behind her and encouraged others to follow, especially with Thoros doing the same. And since he seems to be her interpreter and always by her side, he's a Northman, so that might mean she trusts him a little bit more. It sort of looks like he's in her inner circle, whatever that even means, along with Lem and Jack B. Lucky. And Lem has gone pretty dark, and Jack B. Lucky is maybe similar. But she doesn't sleep, and they have to. So her guard has to rotate at least somewhat, because if she's active 24/7, well, they can't be. So they have to go in shifts, I guess. Now, Old Stones is when we first see her, right, with Merritt Frey. That's near there. That's not terribly far south from the Twins. Probably just a matter, maybe like a week at most, maybe quite a bit less. So it's easy enough to guess she was reborn downriver, right? She tossed into the river. She floats downriver, her body, then they find her there, and then they go south farther. Now, Fairmarket is roughly equidistant downriver from there. So you go the Twins, Old Stones, downriver a bit, you get to Fairmarket. So roughly the same distance between the Twins and Fairmarket, from Fairmarket to Old Stones. And it's on the same side of the Blue Fork. They're both on the west bank of the Blue Fork, so that kind of lines up. Sir Lucius Viperin hunts them near Fairmarket with no success. We're told she was seen at Hagsmire, which is where the headwaters of the Blue Fork is, and it's near the town of Seven Streams, which is where Tom O'Sevens is, of course, from. Hagsmire is also where Robb announces his will, and it's where Chet is from. So kind of an unsavory place there. Poor spot. Black Walder also hunts them there. He chases them there, but they get away. They apparently have a good system for keeping an eye on the roads and the approaches, so they kind of always know when someone's coming towards them. They know the land better than anybody. They have people who have lived there their whole lives on their side, which is why having the common folk on your side is so vital when you're a resistance organization. It's, if I can get real world for a minute, it's a huge part of how the mafia operates and why they're so successful. Very often they help the communities that they prey on in order to win their support. Even though they're also preying on them, they do enough good to make some people convinced that it's better than not having them, that they're more good than bad. Rarely is that true, but it's propaganda, it's marketing. They are able to convince people of this. And, Pablo Escobar pulled that off on a grand scale, but much smaller level criminals and drug dealers or what have you do similar things. So, so it's interesting to think about that and how important having the common folk is. If you don't have the common folk, you have nothing in this when you are an outlaw or a resistance movement. Another time we're told Blackwalder chases her party is north of here, and there he chases them for a while. Like, it's quite a chase, like several days, maybe even a week or two, and he's constantly on their heels, and they're constantly trying to stay ahead of him. They flee into the Neck, and he does not follow them there, so because he's not stupid. And because following them into the Neck would be a bad idea. They probably have the support of the Crannogmen. I mean, their enemy is the enemy of the enemy is my friends, and they may not even be. They may be friendly anyway, because it's Stoneheart, it's the Brotherhood, it's Ned Stark's connection, and all that. Anyone who's going after Frey is going to have an opportunity to win over the Crannogmen, though. So that's kind of what I mean by that. Not to mention Robb's will is probably in their possession, or was, and as well as a lot of Robb's officers might have either still be in the Neck or have passed through the Neck and have spoken with Howland Reed, et cetera, et cetera. So a number of reasons why Blackwalder was wise to not follow them there. Generally speaking, all of the sightings of her have been in the region of the Twins. She hasn't been seen terribly far away from there. The Neck is about as far north as she's been seen, just the southern portion of the Neck, presumably, because no one follows her in there. She probably doesn't have to go that deep into the Neck because no one's going to follow her there. And then, around Old Stones and around Fairmarket, none of these are that far from the Twins, maybe a couple weeks at most. Right before her judgment and near hanging, Brienne is told that she's going to meet Stoneheart pretty soon, but not yet because she went to Fairmarket. And of course, that's, as I explained earlier, that was to hang Ryman. Now, how did she know that they were there? Well, this is almost certainly a part of their intelligence network. The most obvious is Tom O'Sevens. Tom O'Sevens is at Riverrun. He was right there playing for Ryman Frey when Jaime said, you must go back to get the hell out of here. So maybe the Queen of Horrors character informed the Brotherhood, or maybe Tom O'Sevens, or maybe both, because we are pretty sure that the camp follower that was with Lord Bracken is a Brotherhood Without Banners member as well. She was explicitly so in some prior versions of it, the unpublished versions of A Dance with Dragons, before the final version was written, like some draft versions of it. Hildy was absolutely a Brotherhood spy. Now she probably is, it just isn't explicit. So we already have seen this element. This is an angle that they take. They use camp followers, sex workers to get close to the leaders of the Lannisters and the River Lords who are still on the side of them, and like the Freys and all that, to get information, to get travel plans and things like that. So this is almost straightforward. Ryman was told to leave, kicked out in front of at least one spy for the Brotherhood. So they knew exactly what was going on there. So that's pretty straightforward. But we've been told there's a lot of other hangings. Not of famous people. Only Merritt and Peter Pimple and Ryman Frey, as far as we know, are the only Freys they've hanged. People with the last name Frey, that is. But they've hanged other Frey and Lannister soldiers, household people, things like that. Because otherwise we're to believe that she's gotten all these nicknames for just hanging Merritt and Peter Pimple. Because the Ryman hanging came after she had already acquired 4 nicknames. So yeah, it seems like there's been a lot of hangings going on. George has no reason to describe every single one of them. There are people whose names we've never heard before. it's enough to imply it. And most of her revenge will be against the Freys. They're the most responsible, they're the most numerous, and they're the closest to her, physically located. Lannisters are also fairly numerous and also not that far away, and they are, of course, intertwined with the Freys. And she also hated them first. She's hated the Lannisters for a lot longer than she hated the Freys because of, the whole Bran trying to murder Bran thing, right? That's a pretty good reason. Especially when she's lied to by Littlefinger to have even more reason to hate them. But even with that lie taken out of the picture, even with Littlefinger's machinations taken out of the picture, she still has plenty of reasons to hate the Lannisters. And as I said before, she can't really get her hands on any Boltons right now. They're neither numerous nor close by, but it is a question for us. Will she go north? And if she does, is that one of the big reasons why? She's like, okay, I've done enough to the Freys and Lannisters. Let me get at some Boltons. They deserve that too. Or maybe she goes north for some other reason, but there's also the Boltons. So she's like, there's multiple reasons for me to go north, but it's also quite possible that the Boltons will be out of the picture before she goes there. Or she just won't go there. That's also possible. You must prove your faith. After hearing the arguments, Lady Stoneheart delivers her judgment on Brienne. Quote,
"The thing that had been Catelyn Stark took hold of her throat again, fingers pinching at the ghastly long slash in her neck, and choked out more sounds. Words are wind, she says," the Northman told Brienne. "She says that you must prove your faith."
The Northman is Harwin. Brienne doesn't really know him, but we do. She knows that Jaime and his army are on the move by this point, meaning Stoneheart does. Of course, there are certainly multiple spies in the region, as we've said, and of course, there's multiple spies at Riverrun, not just in the region. So there's a lot of thinking and planning and cunning ahead of time. There are definitely a lot of planning ahead, getting ahead of what the Lannisters are going to do and ambushing them. Now, that said, they're obviously beefing up security. There's been several Freys hanged, as in the epilogue. It's like, hey, I brought the ransom money. You're not, and they're like, yep, we're not going to get away with that one again, are we? Like, they're not going to fall for the old ransom trick again because we murdered you. So they aren't about that. They're not going to get away with that. Also, any Frey traveling from place to place is probably smart enough to travel with a bigger escort. Now, Ryman Frey had 12 warriors with him, which isn't that many, right? He's him and so it's 13 guys, and it's kind of a stretch to call him a warrior. But they might still underestimate how many men the Brotherhood can bring to bear. Maybe not, though, because as we were saying earlier, it's hard to get a feel for how many people are in this group. Nevertheless, this was also something they were good at. Like, even before Stoneheart, ambushing and spying and all this stuff, they were already quite adept at this. So Stoneheart probably isn't the one instilling this in them. She's just taking it over and making use of it, but adding to some things she already knows. I mean, she knows some things about Riverrun. She knows some things about how the Highborn think. There's definitely some things she's bringing to the table, but a lot of it was already in place before she arrived on the scene. And so Beric and Stoneheart, they've lost some of their humanity, some of what makes them human, but they don't seem like they're less intelligent. Like, they still have the IQ level they had before, but maybe not as much emotional IQ. I don't know the right terms for this, but they seem like their processing power, their logic is all still there. But some of their memories and their emotional state, that's all different, or at least compromised. Now, here is the confrontation of the delivery of Stoneheart's verdict. Quote,
"What does she want of me?"
"She wants her son alive, or the men who killed him dead,"
said the big man.
"She wants to feed the crows like they did at the Red Wedding. Freys and Boltons, aye. We'll give her those, as many as she likes. All she asks from you is Jaime Lannister. So that was Lem speaking. She was referring to Harwin, but it was Lem who answered. Lady Stoneheart has another form of power, which is that as scary as she is, as dark as she is, people hate the Freys more, probably, even though they're, human. And she is the avatar of this because she's both the prime victim and prime hunter of the Freys. So she has the sympathetic argument on her side. She's got the injustice argument on her side. She's got the I'm the leader that's making this happen argument on her side. Her very existence is a testament to how big a crime the Red Wedding was. It's almost like the gods have answered. They're like, this shouldn't be possible, yet it's clearly happening. And the only explanation is powers beyond humanity. Other beings, deities, powers from beyond have taken a role here. And the easy answer is because of the monstrosity that was the Red Wedding. It was that much of an offense to the gods. Guest right, it's that big a deal to violate guest right on that scale with this much infamy. I mean, it's just so big. Now, of course, Brienne resists. She's honorable. She's not going to give up just like nothing. She's got to put up a fight, at least an argument if she can. But she doesn't really have much choice, does she? She has to give in. She's like, no, I won't do this. Jaime's innocent. I know he's innocent. I've seen it. It's my personal judgment, and his actions prove it. It's so tragic. We've seen inside Brienne's head. I mean, she is more than sincere. Here it is. I pulled the quote because it's kind of heart-wrenching just how devoted she is to this mission, only to have Stoneheart think she's betrayed it. Yeah, here it is, quote.
She had spoken of Arya too, her younger daughter, but Arya was lost, most likely dead by now. Sansa, though, I will find her, my lady. Brienne swore to Lady Catelyn's restless shade. I will never stop looking. I will give up my life if need be, give up my honor, give up all my dreams, but I will find her.
She would give up her honor. This is Brienne. Like, that's huge. Like, this is number one on her list. This is more important than killing Renly's murderers. Like, she doesn't even think of Renly in this moment. That's how big this is for her. And the quote there, Brienne swore to Lady Catelyn's restless shade. She doesn't know Stoneheart exists at this point. This quote is from way earlier. This is from like her first chapter in A Feast for Crows. So well before she even knows Lady Catelyn's walking around. So that's a little clever wording there by George. So we see this inside Brienne's head. That's one of the things that about the POV structure of this whole series that gives us surety on certain things. But we don't see inside Stoneheart's head anymore. We used to when she was alive. That makes her an unusual, interesting, unique POV. She's the only POV character that's still walking around. I can't say alive, but walking around whose POV we don't have anymore. We lost a POV of a person still walking around. George said no new POVs. He could go back on that if he wants to. Of course, he can change his mind. He didn't sign some contract saying, I will never put a new POV in. No, of course not. He could go back to her. She's technically not a new POV, right? It also raises questions about Jon. Might that be the path for Jon, too? Will Jon cease to be a POV? Not for the rest of the series, although that's possible, too. I kind of doubt that. But maybe temporarily, as long as he's in Ghost, as long as it's his second life, as long as he's in that state, we might not get his POV. When he comes back to his own body, maybe we will. That's just one possible way for George to handle it. For all we know, he hasn't even decided yet. I hope he has. But that's a possibility. Whatever's going on with Catelyn, with our Stoneheart, we got to try to put that on Jon and see how it works. See how it fits. So Jaime is captured. We know that much. It's seemingly straightforward there. Kevin tells Cersei that he went off with Brienne for some reason. And Cersei is baffled by that. And Kevin probably was too. They both don't have any idea why he did that, but we do. We know that we know exactly what Brienne said to him, that the Hound has Sansa, but he'll kill her, if you don't come. So he goes with. He's like, well, which is more proof that he's sincere about helping Lady Catelyn. He's sticking to his vow. He wouldn't go off with her if he didn't care about fulfilling his vow. He's like, oh, go ahead, let the Hound kill Sansa. I don't care. It's also, by the way, as an aside, it's interesting that Brienne's focused on finding Sansa, had given up on Arya. Stoneheart hadn't given up on Arya because the Brotherhood had her in their possession. So that's the one she's most concerned with, because she was lost in the Riverlands. She's like, okay, this is maybe my best bet. So they both have a different view of who the other is looking for. But of course, Brienne actually doesn't know that they've continued to look for Arya. Maybe she'll find that out. Maybe they've told her more since she's been off screen. Either way, though, I just don't see either Brienne or Jaime dying at the hands of the Brotherhood. I just don't see it. I don't think that's how it's going to go. So, first of all, how ungrateful by the Brotherhood that they don't thank Jaime for sending Ryman Frey. It's he sent Ryman Frey away, and they captured him because of that. Don't they owe him something for that? But we've seen how the Brotherhood is willing to settle things by trial by combat. Jaime can't fight for himself. He's incapable. And Brienne knows for sure that he's innocent. So Brienne would step up. If it's a trial by combat, Brienne would fight for him. And presumably win. There's not a single member of the Brotherhood that can take Brienne. I don't think. I mean, not anyone we've heard of. Lem can't take Brienne. He might think he can, but no way. Thoros himself, I don't think so. I don't think Thoros is going to fight in a trial by combat. It's not his role. I don't think. Don't think so. Anyway, will Stoneheart honor the result? That's an interesting possibility, that she's just too vindictive and too vengeful to abide by the result. However, I still don't think it will result in the end of Jaime or Brienne. Maybe there's just no trial at all. We shouldn't assume that's what's going to happen. Maybe they will use Jaime for some other purpose. Something that doesn't kill him. Something that as bait or as a lure, as who knows. They may have something more clever in mind. But presumably he gets out of this. And Brienne does too. How? We'll have to wait and see. I think the trial by combat is maybe the simplest explanation. But even that has some issues, So... but it's still hard to predict how either of them would die there. Even said, I'm not referring to the TV show ending for either of those characters as why I'm perplexed here. Brienne's ending, that would be such a weak ending for her to be killed by the Brotherhood. I don't see it. And Jaime being killed there, that's not foreshadowed. He has to be the one to kill Cersei, doesn't he? Or at least be reunited with her, so there's further tragedy and settling of that arc. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like it's going to end there. But what if they do have a trial by combat? There's another option here. What if it's fought in front of a heart tree or near one? Could Bran then witness it? Well, he could witness it anyway. His powers may have grown to the point where he doesn't have to have a heart tree to see things, but let's assume he does. Or let's assume that there's some other reason for having a heart tree nearby, which is that Bran could maybe try to communicate through it. Maybe he could whisper through it like he may have done to Theon. Even just observing it would be a big deal, because Bran hasn't seen that his mother is walking around undead. What a revelation that would be. Not a pleasant one for sure, but it would also be confusing, and it might even be weird to the children. The children who have all this magic and lore, they might not be aware this is possible. They might be like, whoa, wait, what? How is... They have this magic too, which might lead to an explanation of some things. This might be a path to explaining how the others work in the first place, their origin, these similarities, this concept of the undead and all these people walking around. I mean, it needs explanation. Bran needs to understand this. He's freaking 8 years old, y'all. He can't just know these things. So the children have a lot more to teach him. Bloodraven has a lot more to teach him. And if he ever just sees that, we've theorized on all sorts of things Bran might gaze into the past and see in the present, and this is just such a big one. He's gonna want to know what's happening to the rest of his family. He's not sure that Arya's dead. They think he's dead, but he doesn't have this news that Arya's definitely dead, or He doesn't think Sansa's dead either. He thinks his mom's dead. He knows his father's dead. But there's a path to him learning otherwise, or at least maybe someone else tells him. If he's reunited with somebody, what if he meets Brienne, at Winterfell? And he's like, by the way, your mom's an undead being, So there's a lot of ways he could learn that, and what a strange thing to try to predict. Like, how would he react to that? Like, Bran is no longer just a kid. I mean, he is, literally, but he doesn't have the personality of one anymore because of all he's seen and had taught to him and learned and all that. Now, Merritt was horrified to see Lady Stoneheart. Here's our section called Reunions. Even though he knew he was about to be executed, it was still a step up. Somehow this was scarier. Like, he already knew he was going to die, yet somehow it got worse without physical pain adding into it, Somehow being seconds away from strangulation it got worse somehow. Like, it's hard to make that worse, but the sheer impossibility of what he was seeing. Like, this doesn't necessarily register with all of us readers because we've seen the undead since the prologue, right? We have to remember that the vast majority of Westeros doesn't even know this is possible for the dead to be walking around. To them, it's a silly story. It's Tyrion. It's like, snarks and grumpkins. It falls in that category. It's something that either never happened or stopped happening long ago. So that is just seeing something that shouldn't be possible is a different kind of terrifying. It's a different kind of unnerving. It's like, wow, my very notion of reality, the way I perceive the world is wrong. What I believe is possible is wrong. There's clearly things. If this is possible, if it's possible for the dead to walk, what else am I ignorant of that's possible in this world? So it's not quite the same as Beric because he was killed repeatedly, and that added to his legend. Like, people were afraid of him just because he's like, you can't seem to kill this guy. They don't literally think he was killed all these times. They just think, wow, the stories about this guy he's hard to kill. That's how it ends up appearing to a regular person. They won't think, oh, that guy's been killed 6 times. Yep, but he keeps coming back because of R'hllor. No, that's not how they perceive it. They just perceive it that he's just hard to kill. That's more rational. That makes more sense. And again, he was raised quickly every single time. Every single time he died, he was only dead for, minutes or an hour or two, right? So that's very different than the 3 to 4 days she was in the water. Surely there's a lot of other folks like Merritt that have been in the same spot as Merritt. They know they're about to get hanged, and then they are confronted with who's behind this, and they realize that how is it possible? So, yeah, it's pretty scary. Let's be specific here with some people that she might reunite with. Arya, of course, is one of the biggest ones because it's the child of hers that she's actively looking for, the child of hers that was actually in the presence of the Brotherhood before her time. What would they do? Both of their reactions are very hard to predict. Stoneheart, it's hard to picture her softening, like she's just a creature of vengeance and death. Seeing her daughter, can she feel happy about this? Can she feel maybe satisfaction, maybe just a sense of something positive, maybe just she can relax a little bit? I don't know. They can't really talk. They can't have a conversation very easily. Maybe they can talk, they can communicate a little bit. Now, that said, Arya is one of the few people, not just in her family, but period, that might not be horrified because of everything she's been through. I mean, Arya is the one who ate the worm out of the skull face and the kindly old man when he tried to look like that, right? So she can manage, right? She's also already seen her mother's dead body through Nymeria's eyes in that wolf dream. She might not be horrified, but she will be shocked. She will be surprised. Arya, just like just about everybody, is not familiar with any form of the undead. She has not seen that. She's seen some things. She's seen more than a lot of people. She's seen some things at the House of the Undying. House of the Black and White. And she knows more about the potential of the supernatural in this world. She's been exposed to more things that should not be than the average person. But she hasn't been exposed to this particular thing, and it's very personal to her, of course, because it's her mother. It isn't just, oh, the dead can walk? That's crazy. Oh, my mother is a walking undead. Yeah, that's a whole nother level, isn't it? And coming back to Nymeria, that's a reason why Arya might go to the Riverlands in the first place. She doesn't know her mom's there. She doesn't know Stoneheart is Catelyn. But if she's going to the Riverlands, maybe to go after the Freys, because they are on her list, not specifically because she doesn't have names. She just knows the Freys are responsible for the Red Wedding. So if she goes there, if she's pulled there, if she's drawn there because of Nymeria, that could lead to an encounter with her mother. Like the Brotherhood might see her and be like, oh, hey, that's Arya. Question from Chance Wilson from Patreon. Do you think Stoneheart won't recognize Arya if and when they cross paths? That's a interesting question. Like if Arya is in disguise, Stoneheart might not know who she is, and if Stoneheart might not be recognizable to Arya by the same token. I think the truth would probably come out, and I'm not sure that Arya needs to hide who she is because not a whole lot of people know what she even looks like. Just given the fact that Roose Bolton is using a fake Arya is part of the evidence of that. Part of that is people aren't willing to challenge Roose on that, but part of it too is they know they can get away with it because most people don't know what Arya looks like. So that's an angle that is something I hadn't considered. Very good question, Chance. I think that even if she doesn't recognize her, if Stoneheart doesn't recognize Arya, I think that would come out. What if what we saw on TV with Arya killing all the Freys, which is a bit over the top, or a lot over the top, what if that is something they do together? What if they reunite and that's where it leads? The two of them are capable. She's like, hey, I'm in on this plan. Let's get those Freys. But this may happen before Arya gets to Westeros, right? Arya, who knows if the timing will line up on that. On the other hand, Arya's Mercy chapter already seems to be pushing her away from the House of Black and White. She's already broken their rules again. She, did her own murder. So maybe that's enough of a ball rolling for her to get to Westeros soon enough for these things to kind of line up. Uncle Brendan. This is a tough one. He doesn't have Arya's experience with the supernatural, which is kind of a funny sentence to say. So he won't just react like, oh, this is nothing. He will be like, what? He's another person that has no idea the dead can walk. And he's been living a lot longer, so his life experience is a little more settled. A 50-year-old man discovering the dead can walk is different than an 8-year-old discovering that. He won't exactly object to what the Brotherhood has accomplished, hanging Freys. He'll be all about that. And they would love to have his leadership in their group. I mean, his ability to plan ambushes, his knowledge of Riverrun itself could be very useful in the planning of strikes or ambushes or infiltration. His ability to communicate, like they already do that really well, but he would add to that. And I believe he's still loyal to the Kingdom of the North. I don't see any reason to see otherwise. Like, why did he escape? What was the purpose of him escaping if he was not going to continue fighting? If he had given up, he would have just surrendered and taken the Black. That would be it. That'd be the end of it, So he clearly continues to keep going. That's what Jaime believes. That's what others believe. They know what kind of man he is. Again, he's been around. He's established. His personality is well known. So they can make predictions based on that, and they're right. So, again, coming back to the idea that the Winds of Winter prologue chapter is supposedly going to include Jane Westerling. Not that she's the POV, not that she isn't, but she's in it. Which means we have her party with Edmure, 400 men, led by Sir Forley Prester, heading to Casterly Rock, could be ambushed by the Brotherhood. Could be ambushed by the Brotherhood with the help of, or with or without Nymeria's wolf pack, with or without Blackfish. Lots of possibilities. He's also a man that people would rally to. If the Brotherhood is having trouble with recruiting because Stoneheart is villainous or dark and they don't necessarily want to sign up for that, they might sign up for fighting under the famous Blackfish, especially Riverlanders who, in the region he's from. And not just because of him, because he's a great guy to fight for, because he's an honorable leader to follow, an established living legend, but because the Freys are cursed. A lot of people see the Freys as just, they need to be punished. They violated guest right and say no more. That's a reason to go after them. People just hate the Freys for that, even if it's not personal. And for a lot of people, it is personal. Now, so it's really hard to judge what Stoneheart will think what Blackfish will think of Stoneheart walking around like this. Like, I have a real difficulty guessing how that might go. But ultimately, he will have to take note that their goals are in alignment, at least somewhat. Maybe he's not as excited about just murdering Freys for the hell of it, but that certainly is in line with his goals of fighting for the Kingdom of the North, the fallen Kingdom of the North, which he hasn't given up on. Remember, he pointed to Jaime Lannisters, like, see, the Stark Bannister flies over these walls. We're not, as long as that's there, I haven't given up. And of course, Stoneheart has Robb's crown, which that's meaningful to him, at least a little bit. He, not only does he want to fight for Jane Westerling, Robb's queen, but the crown of the North is an important, artifact, important item for their cause. So, yeah, who knows what they'll talk about? Like, this probably isn't a scene we would have on page, but it's just really hard to figure. I don't think Stoneheart, it's not hard from her perspective. She'd be like, hey, uncle, get on board, help us out. We could really use your skills. His reaction is the one that's hard to figure, questionable. Further theories in our Blackfish episode. We've got more in that one, so check that out if you want more on him. Earlier, we mentioned the possibility of going into the neck. So what about the Howland Reed? What is Howland Reed's involvement here? We mentioned some of the northern leaders that might be hiding in the neck with him, but what about him specifically? Could he help? Could he have an opinion on Catelyn walking around? He knows what she looks like, unlike a lot of the other people. He would have met her briefly, only briefly, because he never went to Winterfell after Robert's Rebellion, we're told, but he did likely go to the wedding of Catelyn and Ned, which happened at Riverrun, like right before the war. So he was with Ned all throughout the war. So he was probably there during that part as well. But we just don't know Howland Reed very well. We've never seen him on screen. So we do know Blackfish, and it's hard enough predicting his reaction to Stoneheart. We don't know Howland Reed very well, so it's even harder to perceive this. The one thing about Howland that I'll say is he's definitely more open and aware of the supernatural. The fact that she's a dead person walking around might be a lot less surprising to him, even though it's still probably surprising, but less surprising. He might be aware of a lot more of what's going on in the North. Sansa. So everyone, quote unquote, knows that Sansa fled after Joffrey's murder. She's implicated by some people, and that Tyrion was her husband, and that Tyrion escaped as well while killing Tywin. So a lot of people think Sansa's probably guilty. A lot of people think Sansa was implicated, that she's a murderer, so that's a big deal. But also, like Arya, I mean, she's not like Arya in that she can see a skull and not react to it. She's a little more squeamish, maybe a lot more squeamish. But she also has no idea the undead are a thing, let alone that her mother is one of them, right? So, question from Renabir Mitra. Here's a good one. Does Baelish's plot potentially intersect with Stoneheart? As in, maybe she's the one, either directly or indirectly, or part of the solution to Peter Baelish in the long term. He probably dies in Winterfell, or at least in the North. So, maybe she's part of what undoes him. Sansa alone can do this with maybe the help of Arya or just some Winterfell loyalists. But that's a good one. Stoneheart's knowledge of what happened and what she's learned since, yeah, that could help undo him. And that would be kind of poetic for the person that he has lusted after, that a lot of his career was as an intriguer and wanton man of ambition who has no qualms and scruples, is motivated by his desire to be worthy of a Catelyn Tully. He believed he deserved her, that he should have won her, and he spent most of his life trying to correct that or fix that or whatever, or get revenge for that, however you want to frame it. So what a thing if he finally does get her, but it's really her getting him. He's like, I'm finally united with, yeah. Another possibility, though, is that he goes to Harrenhal. It is his castle. I don't suppose he will. I figure he's going to go from the Vale to the north and never bother to go to Harrenhal. But what if he, maybe he makes a stop there on the way. It's not really on the way, but he might need to go that way for some reason. Probably not, but it's worth thinking about. That would be a way for this to come to a head. Like, it could happen there. She's in the Riverlands. George doesn't want Stoneheart to go north, so he's got to have this resolution happen down there. Because how could Stoneheart go north? That might be tricky for her as well. She may not want to go north, because it's where the Freys and Lannisters aren't up there. Well, there are some Freys up there, but not as many. I don't think it would be difficult for her to go north, because Howland Reed, the neck, like, that should be open to her. But especially now that the Ironborn are no longer in Moat Cailin. But Stoneheart and Baelish, yeah, that is definitely possible. It's a compelling thought. I'm down. I'm not too big on the Harrenhal possibility, but it's worth mentioning. The Winterfell possibility, yeah. Like, picture Merritt's reaction, picture Brienne's reaction to realizing who this really is. Like, oh my God, it's her. Littlefinger's reaction to that would be the smirking, I know you what you don't know, man, truly undone by something he could have never seen coming. The Game of Thrones is what he's focused on, and the Game of Thrones, for the most part, does not involve the supernatural, just the fight for the throne. And he's so focused on that. This is not part of his world. What a thing. There's a lot of people who are pure intrigue, pure mundane. I don't mean mundane, boring. I mean, they're not involved with anything supernatural. A lot of that's going to come to a head. The supernatural is becoming a bigger part of the story. It's stretching out. It's flooding more of the POVs. More and more of the arcs are getting tied into it, little by little, or a lot by a lot, or some of them are already quite deep in it. So those collisions will be very interesting to see. The people who have operated very successfully outside of supernatural means, Littlefinger, Varys, to a lesser extent Tyrion, things like that, when they come full circle and realize that this stuff is real and that it's big and that it's can't be ignored, well, there's a lot of reckoning going to happen there. A lot of people are going to have to really change their worldview, and some of them won't have time for that. Some of them are just going to die before they can ever, figure out what it is they missed or understand what it is that's happening. So in the Winterfell in the north, we're kind of already in that subject, but a little more here. The original plan for Catelyn in a game when it was a trilogy, when George had his first thoughts on what was going to happen, Catelyn was going to die beyond the wall. He didn't specify that she would be resurrected or raised afterwards in the original outline that I can recall, but it seems likely that was his plan, because that would be a place for that to happen, right? For someone dies beyond the wall and then they rise up again. Like, there's plenty of that happening, right? That would be quite a thing to have happen to her. But whether she was going to be like a cold hands kind of thing where she still had a lot of her personality and could still talk and do other things, or whether she'd be more like a real ice white that has maybe nothing going on other than some memories deep in there. They can't talk. They can't. Yeah. So a lot has changed since then in both how George has conceptualized not just the series, but the world, these characters, how the supernatural stuff works. Still, there's some of those original elements are probably still around. Can she pass the wall? Probably not. She's undead. Like, I don't think the wall is attuned to only the undead raised by the others. It's probably all of them. I mean, I think, and might have problems with Winterfell too. Winterfell has some anti-magic in it too. Storm's End had anti-magic in it. Remember, Melisandre needed to be rode inside in order to unleash her shadow. Had she released the shadow outside, it wouldn't have gotten in. So these things are perhaps related conceptually. Yeah, and I wonder, maybe George is going to be nicer and let her find out that Rickon's alive, that Bran's alive, that Sansa got out of Tyrion's clutches and was never really that deeply in his clutches in the first place. Either way, she's away from the Lannisters. Although she's in Littlefinger's clutches instead, which might even be worse in some ways, but less worse in others because Littlefinger is not as powerful militaristically as the Lannisters. He doesn't have the wealth and all that. So in some ways, he's a less dangerous foe if you've identified properly that he is one. What makes him so hard to get is he's so clever about not being recognized as the problem. So I really wonder about that. Like, will she learn? Will she have that relief of learning that actually Robb is the only one that's dead of your children? It's quite opposite from what you believe. You believe, like, for a while you thought Robb was the only one around, but you have it backwards. So that would be nice for her to learn that. But how does that affect her in this state? What does feeling better mean when she's a revenant type creature? Now, in terms of the dark side here and her outlook for continuing vengeance, what might she accomplish? What kind of predictions do we have? We've talked about the Red Wedding 2.0 in a bunch of different episodes, and she is absolutely possible here. The addition of the Blackfish into her squad may add a lot of potential there, because if they're, not only does he just have general expertise and motivation, but he has knowledge of Riverrun, right? The Red Wedding 2.0, that's where it would take place, at Riverrun. So, in order to have the new Freys of Riverrun sort of announce their presence, sort of kick off their reign, and announce, just to establish themselves within the Riverlands, right? It's no longer the Tullys, it's us. We got to have a big event to, spread the word, all that. So that's a possibility. And if that happens, then that might be a lot of Freys getting killed. That might be the getting us to the place the TV show took us, with a whole lot of Freys being killed, except it'll be by her instead of by Arya. And coming back to the Jane Westerling, Edmure's captive party led by 400 men going to Casterly Rock, that's obviously included here as well as a strong possibility for her to interfere with that train of people. So the Freys and Lannisters are no longer ignorant of her. They're ignorant of her true origin and the fact that she's a magical being. But so this, you can't just assume that this Red Wedding 2.0 will be easy to pull off. That they won't be, well, of course it won't be easy to pull off, but that they won't see it coming. The Tullys, not the Tullys, the Freys and the Lannisters and all these folks in the Riverlands that are on that side, they're well aware that they're hated. They're well aware that Freys are getting hanged from traveling from place to place. They aren't ignorant of that. It's very straightforward. So they're going to tighten up security. They know what they did. They're wary of kickback, of vengeance, of people coming back at them. Doesn't mean it will be sufficient security. Doesn't mean that they will prevent what's coming, prevent their karmic justice. But they won't be caught totally off guard either, I don't think. In fact, just people traveling to the wedding, going to the wedding, that might put them at risk. That alone might be a problem. Like, I don't know if I want to go to that wedding. I might get killed on the way there. I don't want to travel with 100 men to make sure I make it there on time. That's just really expensive. On the other hand, these are the new lords of Riverrun. They're not the new lords of the Trident, but they are the new lords of Riverrun, so I would put them in a difficult spot. But they also want to put the Red Wedding in the past. Like, they don't want people to keep thinking of that. They want to sort of erase their wrongdoing here. Like, let's do as much as we can to correct people's opinion of us. It's going to take a while, but, better get started on that. We'll try to have a big, successful wedding party, a fresh start, a new beginning. Well, we'll see about that. And will the wedding still go off the way it was going to, with Jaime being captured or running off with Brienne? Like, his army is just kind of listless and standing there and waiting to figure out what happened to him. Is the wedding just going to go along as planned with things like that happening? Or are they just like, Jaime's just on some side quest, don't worry about it, They don't know what to think at this point, but the longer he's missing, the more they'll be concerned. The Lannisters are also aware of who they're climbing in bed with, and they don't like it. It was Tywin's deal. Tywin made the deal with them and kind of inflicted it on the rest of the Lannisters. No other Lannisters were even aware of it before it happened, except probably Kevin. It's another massive failure on Tywin's part. His legacy, he wanted to make his family safe and powerful and for the long run. But this is not accomplished. This has accomplished the opposite. He's empowered a whole generation of people who look at the Lannisters, the Freys more so, but also the Lannisters, as breakers of guest right. They're not as accursed as the Freys, but their reputation was already bad, and now it's worse. And with Tywin's death, they're now not as scary. So you've got they're where they're at is hanging on to power, but no one really is loyal to that. They're just there because they don't have a choice. If given an alternative, people will jump that Lannister ship. Whether it's to young Griff or someone else, like a Sansa going north, or to Daenerys or something like that. Who knows? But they're not going to be tied to the Lannisters out of, loyalty or ideology. It'll be just because they don't see a better option for their own survival. So people like Jaime and to a lesser extent Cersei, Kevin would have been in this category were he not dead now too, we are concerned about how everyone sees us because of our involvement in this heinous event. So check out Davin Lannister, who, if there's a Red Wedding 2.0, he's the groom. So he's right in the middle of this. Here's what he has to say about it while speaking to Jaime. Quote, "The Freys are prickly where marriage contracts are concerned. I would hate to disappoint them again."
Sir Davin snorted. "I'll wed and bed my stoat, never fear. I know what happened to Robb Stark. From what Edwin tells me, though, I'd best pick one who hasn't flowered yet, or I'm like to find that Black Walder has been there first. I'll wager he's had Gatehouse Amy and more than thrice. Maybe that explains Lancel's godliness and his father's mood."
Yeah, this isn't exactly the speaking, in tones about your former leader that are very respectful. Yeah, like he doesn't mention Tywin, but it's Tywin who arranged all this. And he's like, why did he put us up to this? Why did he make us do this? Why did he tie us to this house that everybody hates? Like we're being pulled down by this, So the comment about stoat is hilarious, right? A lot of people say the Freys look like weasels, but, Davin thinks it's more like a stoat. He's like, weasel isn't quite right. It's more of a stoat. So if we're talking about other people who are a target, a younger Lannister like Joy, who is a bastard, Joy Hill, he's being married to one of the Spicers, or an elder one like Jenna Lannister, Tywin's sister. Like Jenna's largely innocent, but she's certainly guilty by association. She's married to a Frey and is a Lannister by birth. In terms of the Brotherhood, it's about as bad as it gets. And now, if we're going back to the realm of tragedy, because I don't think too many people will be sad about Jenna Lannister or even Joy Hill being killed, we might recognize that it's not necessarily fair, but they're not exactly beloved characters. If Olyvar or Perwyn Frey, the good guy Freys, the ones that when Catelyn is having her dark revelation about what's about to happen at the Red Wedding, she realizes, she touches the mail on Ryman's arm, or Edwin, I forget which one it is, realizes what's going on. She realizes that Olyvar and Perwyn's lack of presence is part of the picture. She's like, oh my God, that's why they're not here. They wouldn't have participated in the Red Wedding. Is she so far gone that even they are targets now? So she's like, I don't care. Olyvar, Perwyn, they're all Freys. That would be a way for us to tell. If she murders, executes Olyvar or Perwyn, especially Olyvar, who's young. He's like, not Gendry, Podrick's age. That's dark as hell, and it tells us that she's gone that far. If she scruples to not do that, well, then that's telling too. I have a feeling it's going to be the former, though, if any, that she's just that far gone. And the Brotherhood wouldn't necessarily know. They don't know that Olivar and Perwyn were the good ones. So they wouldn't necessarily speak up and go, hey, isn't this guy, like, wasn't he kind of all right? Yeah, so I don't know about that. That's bad. So returning briefly to the idea that she might go north, it could be in relation to the others. Like this is an attack on the realm. The Brotherhood might want to help with that, and some of them might break with her over that. Or she could lead them there to deal with that. But while secretly she's more interested in fighting Boltons and Freys that are up in the north, or maybe she's heard that Sansa or Arya is there, and she wants to go there to be reunited with them. It doesn't have to be, the main motivation might be just one of her children, or Rickon, right? Excuse me. It doesn't have to be related to her vengeance. It could be related to reuniting with her children. But it could also be both. So, because the Boltons might be done for by the time she even considers going north. Stannis might be in charge. He might be dead too. Who knows? So with the Jaime and Brienne stuff happening, reunion and her family could impact where she's going, and there's the vengeance. What about after all that? What if all or none of that happened? Well, some of it will happen. It can't all be not happening. But what about past that? Well, we just don't know. Even people who can look ahead, even people with prophetic powers don't know. Bran has not seen her in the flames. Melisandre has not seen her in the flames. Thoros has specifically looked. And here's what he saw or didn't see. Quote,
"We were king's men when we began," the man told her. "But king's men must have a king, and we have none. We were brothers, too, but now our brotherhood is broken. I do not know who we are, if truth be told, nor where we might be going. I only know the road is dark. The fires have not shown me what lies at its end."
Very metaphorical way to put it. The fires are what shows him the future, but the road is dark. It's like the fires do not illuminate that portion of what he's looking for. So, and not only does no one perceive her now, no one predicted her. Like, we didn't see, there's no prophetic vision or dream in the entire series I can think of that is tells of her coming. There is no, like, Stoneheart's coming kind of thing, even something vague. If I'm missing something, definitely point it out for me, and I'll give you a shout out. Nothing I could see that points to that. Plenty of things are predicted. Plenty of things are seen. The Red Wedding, of course, is one of those things that comes up, even in the Ghost of High Art's visions, but nothing after. If she passes her life force on, because maybe she feels complete. Her children, she finds out, are alive. She's murdered enough Lannisters and Freys to be satisfied. What happens? Does she pass her life force on to somebody? Now, back in the day, before A Dance with Dragons, before A Feast for Crows, when we only knew the barest existence of Stoneheart, because obviously she's the last chapter of A Storm of Swords, one of the theories was that she'd redeem herself with regards to Jon Snow and her treatment of him by passing her life force onto him. It doesn't seem like that's the case, though. It seems like Melisandre is right there, and she's more likely to do it, let alone the fact that that's how it went on the TV show, which it's not necessarily strong evidence, the TV show, but it certainly isn't helping the other argument. It certainly doesn't push towards Stoneheart, which it couldn't because Stoneheart wasn't on TV. So I don't know. Maybe it's like Beric, where he passes his life force onto someone who she thinks was killed unjustly. Maybe she has some sort of repenting moment, or she sees somebody that needs to go on that's more important, someone who is needed. I don't know why she would perceive it that way, but this is George R. R. Martin. We can't predict what he's going to do. His level of creativity is certainly beyond our ability to predict his creativity. It could even be someone like Brienne. Like, what if Brienne dies and he brings her back, or she brings her back? Like, that seems not very likely, but even that's possible. If she just realizes she treated Brienne badly, she realized that she was on this quest all along. I don't know how she would learn that. I don't know how she would learn that Brienne was sincere about that, but it's possible, right? So of all the characters cut from the show, this is also probably the one George was the most vocal about. He even said to Michelle Fairley, after the end of the season with the Red Wedding, season 3, he said, "See you next season." That was awkward because she was like, "I'm not coming back." She knew already, but he didn't. So, yeah. Not the best of communication there, showrunners to George. So she's a very unusual and tragic and murderous character. The murderousness is fueled by a lot of the tragedy, too. Her supernatural elements are also pretty unique. Not directly raised by a red priest, but seemingly empowered by the magic of R'hllor, expanding on what we know to be possible in that regard, and just deepening the level of raised beings, undead beings in the story, widening that umbrella. One of the very few people raised from the dead who isn't a ice wight. It gives us more knowledge on what fire wights are, and it's pretty fascinating, and I hope we learn more, not just from Stoneheart, but maybe from Jon, maybe from who knows who else. Our trivia question today was, Lady Catelyn is famously killed at the Red Wedding. What was the original location George planned for her death? The answer is Beyond the Wall. It wasn't any more specific than that, just Beyond the Wall. The Starks were going to flee Beyond the Wall because of Tyrion capturing Winterfell was the original plan, or them losing Winterfell instead of Theon or the Boltons. And yeah, she was going to die beyond the wall. So there you go. Our poll results. The question was, will Arya and Stoneheart meet? Yes or no? 77% of you said yes. 23% said no. So most of y'all, more than 3/4 say yes. I would put myself in that group. I would say yes. I think they will. What do you think, Ashaya?
I said yes, but there was also a debate in the chat about whether Arya has met Stoneheart because Nymeria pulls Stoneheart's body out, but I argue that that's not Stoneheart at that point. That's the corpse.
Yeah, she hadn't been raised yet.
Yeah, she hadn't been raised yet, so I still don't think that counts, but that was the debate that happened.
But she would recognize that. If she saw Stoneheart walking around, she would remember that moment and be like, oh my God, how are you? Yeah. So, but that doesn't get directly at this question. So, some other episodes mentioned that relate to this one. Arya's List, Blackfish, our Mercy chapter analysis, our Elaine chapter analysis, the Brotherhood Without Banners episode, the Thoros of Myr episode. We have our Valar Reread Us series for A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons, the relevant chapters, Jaime, Cersei, Brienne. And of course, the Kevin epilogue, which contains some of these related thoughts as well. I believe I mentioned one or two other ones that relate to this one, but I can never keep them all. Never keep track of them all. We just have too many episodes. What do we have? We have well over 500 episodes. Not that many if you subtract TV episodes, but it's still over 300. So, as we go farther, deeper, and longer, it becomes a little harder to keep track of. But that's a good problem to have, isn't it, folks? Thanks to Nina for her insight and great takes on this topic. Thanks to Joey Townsend for our intro music. Thanks to Michael Klarfeld for his great map design. You can see it behind us and the intro video. You can find him at klaradox.de. Link should be in the description. On behalf of Ashaya, I'm Aziz. We'll see you next time, and you know what to do. Until then, Valar Reread Us.